It envelops the world in its cold embrace, penetrating every corner of the soul and causing hearts to beat to its terrifying rhythms. Many believe that the greatest horror of war is the roar of weapons, the cries of the wounded, the fear of death. But there are other horrors, born in the shadows of battle, unseen and elusive like shadows in a dark forest. Here is one of them. On the fields of Flanders, a new battle unfolded. With every turn, there lurked deadly peril. Military trenches groaned with mud and blood, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder, death, and despair. Among the thousands of war stories, one stood out: the tale of the mysterious soldier who instilled fear in the hearts of even the bravest warriors. It was said that he was seen only in the darkest of nights, when the stars hid behind clouds and the moon cowered beyond the horizon. He was tall, almost ethereal, with a face concealed by a dark helmet through which gleamed two cold, white eyes. In his hands was a long, black blade that flickered in the light reflected from the enemy campfires. Those who saw him claimed that his shoulders bore a cloak stained with the blood of his victims. Most dismissed him as mere legend, a story told to bolster courage among the soldiers. But not everyone was so sure. There were those who insisted they had seen him, felt his presence in the darkness, heard his cold laughter in the winds of war. One day, after a long day of battle, a young soldier named Lucas decided to sink into a heavy sleep, despite all the tales of horror that hung in the air. He settled into his trench, drenched in cold sweat, flinching at every sound in the night's silence. When Lucas finally fell asleep, his dream was more vivid than he could have imagined. He was on the battlefield, surrounded by darkness. A strange, cold wind pierced his bones, and the ground beneath his feet trembled with an impending storm. And there, in the darkness, he saw him. The figure stood before him, shimmering in the moonlight. Lucas could feel fear paralyzing his body. He couldn't move or scream. The black helmet hid the stranger's face, but his eyes glowed like embers in a furnace. The dark soldier raised his sword and began to approach Lucas slowly. Each step felt like a thunderous blow to his heart. Lucas tried to flee, but his legs were as if anchored to the ground. And then, the dark soldier stood before Lucas, and suddenly, instead of a sword in his hands, there was a red fang streaked with black blood. He raised it above his head, and Lucas felt the cold metal against his neck. At this, Lucas jolted awake. His body was drenched in sweat, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst from his chest. He looked around and found no one. No dark soldier, no horrifying sword. But at that moment he heard something behind him. He slowly turned and saw him, the dark soldier, standing nearby, with his menacing eyes gleaming in the darkness. Lucas jumped to his feet, grabbed his weapon, and ran as fast as he could. He didn't look back, didn't glance behind him, but he knew the soldier was following him. He could feel his cold breath on his neck, hear his footsteps in the darkness. Finally, Lucas reached his trench, darted inside, and sealed himself in. He breathed a sigh of relief, but the fear still wouldn't leave him. He knew the dark soldier was still out there, in the darkness, somewhere close by, and that at any moment he could return. And so ended Lucas's story. He could no longer fight, could no longer cope with the fear that haunted him day and night. He lost his mind and consciousness, becoming a victim of his own imagination. And since then, when the war ended and peace returned to the fields, no one saw Lucas again. He disappeared, as if he had never existed. But the legend of the dark soldier lived on, reminding everyone that war is not only the roar of weapons and cries of pain, but also the dark forces lurking in the depths of the human soul.